Hey everyone, happy Wednesday and welcome to Midnight Hatter Live, the weekly variety show where we talk tabletop, video game dev, and all things Gundam. Hope everyone's having a good evening and a great week on this whiskey-free Wednesday for me. I'm sipping on water today. I am Steven, of course, your host, and joining me as always is the brilliant Adam Blue. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, doing good. You know what? I've got water myself. I am constantly drinking these seltzer waters. It's just, I moved away from soda a long, long, long time ago, and since then it's always been water. But adding just a little bit of flavor and carbonation,
Yeah, just a little
it's,
bit.
it's really nice. Yeah.
And then of course, like being a Southern boy, I noticed that Kroger, they're the Kroger grocery store brand seltzer water, they actually have a flavor. It's called like Fizz and Co, I think. Have you seen those?
Oh no.
They're like
Mm.
soda flavored seltzers. So there's like a root beer, there's like a Dr. Pepper,
Okay.
and a cola flavored seltzer. Same thing, it's just, carbonated water,
I,
but with that extra flavoring.
yeah, I have seen that actually, just not at Kroger. I was just the other day. I saw something that was root beer flavored. Yeah, and I was like, should I pick this up? I'll just stick with what I'm used to, which is usually something that's watermelon
Yeah.
flavored.
Yeah, it's summer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet. Well, hey everyone in the chat, how y'all doing? Robert, Ultronymous, Ian, good to see you
Oh
all.
yeah, good to see you all.
Hey Matt, how's it going? Hope we are sounding well and everything's coming
Yeah.
through clearly. We've got our video going. I mixed up the display here a little bit so that now we have some chat on screen when we don't have something to show. Anyway, moving on to some, just intro stuff. Gundam Explained podcast. Gundam Explained, the channel that that Adam is so kind to provide so much content. 3 videos a week plus a podcast. The links to that are in the description below. Go check that out, and remember that we will be live on the Gundam Explained YouTube channel, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Central, tomorrow. So. We also have some cool stuff down in the Patreon and locals. I have some preview material that I'm going to show a little bit later, probably in a few minutes here, that will hopefully entice people to join the community a little bit, and we're going to do some community build type stuff. Adam's inspired me with the Gunpla community builds. So I've got something to share with you on that front as well. So, before we hop into the show proper, I do want to give a little shout out to our mutual friend, Richie, aka the Zionic Shadow. Shout out to providing us with these awesome stickers that are going to make my Gundam creation station all that more visually appealing.
Yeah, I know they're awesome. I've got some myself too. Yeah, and I guess you can find them at the Zionic Shadow on Twitter, and I even think there is a store name as well.
Yes. So I've got
Shop Zionic.
link
Yeah.
down in the description to his Instagram. The Zionic Shadow represents Zeeg, New York, which is like the New York community of Gundam fans and Gunpla builders. Go check them out. There's a lot of talented, much more talented than Adam and I. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of great art out there.
and if you look closely at this image, I'll actually zoom in on the next one. So here's a little preview of something I've been working on, a little video that is going to be coming out soon. This is the fully painted and finished and primed and all that good stuff miniature that I 3D printed. This miniature is actually still available on the Patreon and locals for download until the end of the month, and then we're gonna swap them out. But I did want to share a video, so I just finished recording the video of painting this little guy and applying some water slide decals. I think he turned out pretty good.
Yeah, man. When I see, you hadn't even shown me this yet. When I saw that picture, I thought that was like a high grade that you put an LED in the helmet. But is that just that activated paint?
Yeah, just that little
Wow.
neon glow paint.
Man, that looks great. And that's just from your STLs, right? Anyone
Exactly.
could really just print this out, and then you're gonna have a video about painting it.
Yeah, so I think that I'm gonna release the video about painting this one. I should have released it a little earlier in the month. I think what I'm going to do next month, and you guys, let me know in the chat if you are into this, and maybe I can talk Adam into doing it with us as well, is, if we all 3D print these guys, we have a little paint off and see who can paint the best Gundam miniature. It's not quite
I
Gunpla,
might need to do that.
but
I
but I think that we could have some fun with it.
Yeah, that's a good, easy way to test painting for smaller surface areas, because that sometimes happens with Gunpla. You might get one that there's some, and this is, yeah, man, I'm gonna dust off my 3D printer now. Even though I'm not using a resin printer, I still think I can get. Oh, and now that I've learned how to do sanding, I can sand away those plastic lines from the type of
Oh
printer
yeah,
I have. So,
the filament
wow,
tracking.
yeah, man, that looks great.
Yeah, I was really pleased with how this turned out. Um, so yeah, that's just some new things that I wanted to share. You actually built some Gunpla this week as well. Did you want to share that real quick?
Yeah, actually, for Father's Day, the family got me, Char's Zagat,
Oh, sweet.
which that was fun. I there was a there was a bunch of meetings earlier this week at work that I had where they were like hands-off meetings. It was more of just listening, taking notes. But in the middle of it, I was like, well, I'm just gonna start working on this. Yeah, 3 hours later, I was complete, and it's a small kit. So that was 3 hours of me taking my time, removing all the nubs. I love now, and thanks to the community, that I've got down a good practice for removing nubs. And so I'm just so proud of these straight builds I do now. So yeah, this one was complete. I love it. One thing I want to show real quick, because I have the Robot Spirits version and
Oh
I love
yeah.
it. I love the design. And they are actually very different, even though it might not seem like it. Some of it has to do with just general shapes. Like the high grade has more of a V where the helmet is and the eye. It's more curved on the Robot Spirits. And when I was comparing these to the actual show, the Robot Spirits is highly, highly accurate, almost like 1-to-1, whereas the high grade is not. There are some differences, and it's very interesting with this that it's not in the show, and I don't know what the purpose of that. So when they create the model kit, do they take liberties, or is it where there's an initial design but the cartoon or the animation doesn't necessarily reflect that, but when they release the model kit they go off the initial design? I don't know.
Well, I mean that's a good piece of information for people out there if they are looking for the anime accurate version of some of these mobile suits.
Yeah.
Then the Robot Spirits line might be the way to go. And it could just be down to engineering. Like sometimes
Yeah.
what the joints that might work in the show don't necessarily work in reality.
Well, yeah, let me show some of that real quick, because on the high grade, you can see that the arms and legs are kind of in like these sections that allow it to rotate anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, on the Robot Spirits, it's not like that, but it still is accurate.
Wow.
And it also is completely articulated, so you're not missing any articulation. I guess, yeah, it's just, I guess that's kind of neat. Two different styles if you're into those sort of things, like the
Yeah.
details of mobile suits.
So does that mean that the joints on the Robot Spirits one, are they more well, because it doesn't necessarily have joints. So like the arm, is it made of like a softer plastic, like a more of a rubberized material?
No, what they did was at the elbow and up at the shoulder, it just has every possible rotation mechanism. And in
Gotcha.
the arm here, where the elbow would be, there is some engineering that allows more of a 90-degree that wouldn't be possible by having it tuck in some of that of yeah part of the hand or whatever. So they're using, what Robot Spirits is good at this. They use some interesting engineering in the articulation in order to get full articulation and without it removing what would make it look anime accurate.
Yeah.
And Ultronomus was saying accuracy versus quality of life is what he's thinking, and that is probably the case, because this model kit, I think the family bought it for me for Father's Day because it was probably the cheapest one when they don't have any idea what kit I've already built or not. And Whereas if you're gonna go pick up one of these, it's pretty expensive.
Yeah, the
So
Robot Spirits line is
yeah,
pretty expensive depending on which one you get. And you
yeah.
know what the nice thing about the Zigak high grade is that you can actually convert that into an SD fairly easily by removing one or two of the joints in the arms.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Yeah, because they're all multi-jointed. That's
Yeah,
funny.
you,
I'm gonna
you
have to
just
do
pop
that
out
actually.
that ball joint and shorten up the arms.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that, affordable Gunpla because it brought back an idea that I had been kind of mulling about with. I had been talking about creating some 3D resin print, components to make some conversion kits that are more affordable than, your perfect grade and master grade conversion kits that,
Oh
at,
yeah.
at the end of everything, you're paying what, probably $100 for the master grade kit and then another two hundred
Oh, another
dollars for
100.
the resin
Yeah.
conversion pieces. So I was like,
Yeah.
let's try and do something that's a little bit more affordable for people. This is not the Zaku in question, but the high grade Char Zaku is probably one of the most affordable and widely available
Hmm,
kits. I mean, it's like
that's right.
$16 maybe on
And you can get it
Amazon.
at Target.
Yeah, you can get it at Target. It's under $20.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking is, and again, this would be the Zaku 2, not the Zaku 1. I just don't have the Zaku 2 handy with me. But I was thinking, what if the first resin conversion kit that I make is one for the high mobility ground type Zaku, which there's not a kit available in high grade for this unit. I do believe there is a Robot Spirits. The one on screen is the
Hmm.
Vincent Gleisner custom. But yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. Have you seen a Robot Spirits version of this?
Yeah, Robot Spirits, not the custom, but Robot Spirits has probably more Zaku's than any other type, and they do have the high mobilities, marine type. They have the worker type. Yeah, it's pretty amazing what they do with those.
So what my thinking is you have a $15-16 Char Zaku 2. There are probably only a couple of resin components required to convert it to the ground type high mobility Zaku. You're talking about what, this slightly angled shield. It's more of like a 30-degree angle instead of a 90-degree angle.
Yeah,
Um, the chest plate, which would be, this is almost more like a goof, isn't it?
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, when I was looking at
And
that.
then
Yeah,
same with the shoulder, a goof shoulder,
yeah,
and then a couple of these
yeah,
thrusters on
yeah.
the calves. So I mean, you're talking about one, two, three, four, five, six little resin parts. You know, if I were to design that and make that available for people, would that be an interesting community build contest to see who could put together, a fun looking ground type high mobility Zaku?
Oh yeah, definitely. And but let me ask you, and I don't know if you know this, but so there's those, yeah, the parts you're talking about, the resin upgrade kits or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's all made in resin, right? Have you come across anyone using 3D printer that's using like the PLA filament?
I haven't, but I think that, there's probably better applications for that as well
Yeah,
because, go ahead.
I think, yeah, no, I'm thinking it could be done because I was just thinking through it. Like, there's a lot that I've been able to do with my 3D printer, even though I see that a resin one is probably better, especially for people watching this show. If you were thinking of getting a 3D printer, a resin one is probably the way to go. But if you don't have one and you have like the Ender 3, for instance, is what I have because that was like the most widely available, like base one to start with.
Yeah,
I've been doing some amazing things with that, or I did in the past. So I think that even if that's all you have, you could probably still do a lot. Because yeah, you can just sand down any of those lines, and even based on how you are having it print, you can make it hide the lines more.
it's
So
true.
there's options there. I'm gonna have to test it out so I can tell you about it. But that requires, and I don't mind doing this. I'm gonna get the 3D printer out. It's actually in the garage, but I have to do that whole realignment thing where I have
Oh,
to align
yeah.
the bed. I got to make sure it's all and do a
The
test
build
print.
plate has to be perfectly
Yeah,
level and all that good stuff. So,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I think that will probably be something that I start up, either, August for my birth month, or next month. We'll, try to put that together. First, I actually need to get the kit. I don't have the high grade Char Zaku. But once I do get it, you better believe that this will be the one I am going to
Oh,
build.
yeah.
Is the Alma Sterner.
When I saw that picture with Zeonic Shadow stickers and I saw that Zaku back there, I was like, is that a Code Fairy one? But I
It's pretty
guess
close.
yeah, it's pretty close. But yeah, that looks great. Um
Yeah.
and yeah, that would be cool. Now I know that they planned to, or they did, or there were just pre-order Code Fairy kits.
They did release a couple. There was the Ifrit
Okay.
Jaeger, I know, came out, but they didn't
But
release
not this one.
the high mobility Zaku, which is
Okay.
crazy to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Um Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't do that. Yes, and yeah, Ian was bringing up that I know for sure because I have this too, and he might as well. There's the Black TriStars robot spirits,
The origin
and that
ones.
actually, yeah,
Yeah.
that has the high mobility stuff going on. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, very
Sweet.
cool.
Well, yeah. So that is that's all the news that I have on Gunpla and minis and 3D printing and all that good stuff. My Zaku just lost an arm. That was kind of weird because I didn't
Well,
touch it.
well, yeah, I hate when stuff like that happens because I was looking at the bottom of my Zagok and I noticed there was something broken off plugged into the thruster. So I'm like, wait a minute, did I break a thruster and didn't realize it? There's always something with these little plastic pieces that we're doing.
Yeah, yeah, and I know it's probably a little harder around your house with unauthorized touching of the model kits.
Well, we can blame me for all that because I have a gate in front of my office
There
because
you
the
go.
office doesn't really have a traditional door. It's kind of just open. And because we got the puppy, it's like, well, we need a gate here because at first the puppy was peeing here and we've got her to stop completely
Awesome.
in the house. She has not peed. I'm gonna wait
Congratulations.
till I move the gate because I started missing thrusters that were on the back of my hazels because those come off. Like if I'm detailing it, I'll accidentally hit the thruster and it falls off. So I'm missing two, and I don't know if it's that, but I used Mecha Parts guy and I was able to order two more.
Oh,
So
good, good. Yeah, you have problems with the puppy. I have had problems with my cats. Same thing. My younger cat, she likes to come over here and relieve herself. And there's actually
oh
an older video on my YouTube channel because she got her hands on this Zeta Gundam's uh, V-fin. And as you can see, I
oh wow,
recovered it because she threw it up about about 40 minutes later. So
wow,
yeah, there's a video on
lucky
on
you.
on on my YouTube channel from ages ago, where I like look at this little pile of cat vomit and I'm like, there's definitely a V fin in there.
Oh wow, man, that is hilarious. Yeah, I think we have a cat too, and she does come in here. She's actually pretty good about it. But sometimes, like if there's something I will, if I'm there's something I'm using a lot on my desk and I leave it out at night, she would pick it up and bring it like to the stairs. I don't know if she's trying to say come back and get it. I don't
She's
know.
like, you were working on this. I'm gonna,
Yeah,
I brought it to you.
yeah,
Um, well, I think it is about time for us to move on to the main topic of the night.
yeah.
Um, I put out a poll on Patreon and got a couple of responses. This was actually something that you and I had talked about in private that you'd mentioned to me that you wanted to talk about because, and I
Yeah.
think this is a great topic, especially for, budding game developers because it's easy to, um, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of doing something and then you kind of get into that scope creep territory where you start wanting to add features because
Mm,
you want features but not because they're necessary to the game. And so, I think that this is a prime example of that territory, which is the open world sandbox video game.
yeah.
Now, I am going to throw this out there because I'm sure that this is the first example that comes to everyone's mind. It's been the most popular one in recent years, but I think that
Breath of the Wild.
That would be the one.
Sorry, I just had to guess.
No, no, and you know what? Everyone kind of goes to this one as their go-to.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that there's. I'll talk into. I'll talk about this a little bit more as we start talking about our opinions about what makes a good open world, what makes a true open world game. But
Mhm.
I am of the opinion that this is not particularly an open world game. It might have a large map, and that's maybe an element of an open world. And I think that there's an example that you are going to bring up, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to spoil the surprise because I think that this is the one that you would want to mention is Elden Ring.
Ah, yeah.
Because
No, this is yeah, this is a good discussion. Do you want me to start on my whole thing, or do you have?
no, no, please, I want you to fire
Okay.
away. Tell me what your definition of an
Yeah.
open world game is and what components are sort of required to get that title in your mind.
Yeah, it's a good one because it makes me dissect Breath of the Wild and stuff like Elden Ring. So, typically I think of an open world game as a game in which you are put into a large area that you can choose how you approach whatever the developers are wanting you to end up doing, like if it's an objective or something, because sometimes it might be that's not based on the overall game's mission, but it could be like collecting things. And so that's what's interesting. What reminds me of RPG when someone says a game's an RPG, it's like, well, what makes it an RPG? Is it just because you have stats on a character? Well, there's so many games that do that that aren't
Yeah,
technically
Madden has
RPGs.
stats.
Yeah. And so I think open world, we were saying it earlier, like a game can be open world, but not necessarily open world. Like Breath of the Wild. I'm actually curious, real quick, if you want to tell me why you don't think it's open world, or what you were saying earlier. Yeah.
So, I would say that my definition is close to yours. And
Okay.
this is obviously one of those things that's kind of up for debate. But I would say that a lot of the things that make an open world game are really the types of interactions that you can have with the environment. If you can't necessarily change things about the environment, then how much of an open world is it? Or is it just a large
Mm,
map, that you can kind of choose which direction you go in? Because I think that both Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring kind of check those boxes where, you can go wherever you want and pursue whatever quests you want, that sort of thing. But what kind of changes are you actually having on the environment? What um is there any systemic elements that make the the world interactive in a way? And that's where I'm going to bring in my third example, which I think is probably my favorite open world game, which would be The Witcher 3.
okay.
The reason I enjoy The Witcher 3 so much as an open world title is because although there's some restrictions about where you can go, from the offset of the game, there are some locations that you kind of have to unlock and things like that. Everywhere you go, you have not only main quests, but side quests that are fully interactive. You have fully, voice acted NPCs that you can interact with. And then the choices that you make throughout the game leave lasting impacts, throughout the
Mm,
throughout the game. You have important NPCs that you can choose to kill or let live, and those ramifications then kind of ripple throughout the world, and the interactions that you have with other NPCs are affected by those. So it's one of those things where I think that that's one of the truly open world titles that's not just a big map with lots of things to do, but you really have a way of leaving a mark on the world.
okay. Really good example. I actually never beat Witcher 3. I kind of got maybe halfway through. I really liked it. I don't know why I didn't stick with it. I think there was just a lot to do. And I'm not a dialogue person, and there is a lot of dialogue within the mission structure.
There
So
is.
that's more personal preference. But what's interesting about Breath of the Wild, now that you're speaking in these terms, like I'm agreeing with you, because if we think about it, the original Legend of Zelda on the NES was an open map
Yeah.
that you go wherever you want. And if you think about how Breath of the Wild works, it's pretty much the same way, because even though it has a and I think this is another attribute to an open world game, but not necessarily applying here, is there's this system, the physics based system that Breath of the Wild uses, that you use it everywhere in the open world.
Right.
But in Breath of the Wild, though, you are not really doing things that then change the game to way the way you can't really approach things in different ways, but it's almost like there's just a limited set of tools on how you can approach something. I would even say Elden Ring's the same way, even though like Elden Ring's almost very linear, even though it doesn't appear to be so, because in Elden Ring you can only progress if you go to certain places, and there are parts of the map that are actually they're like almost like a corridor in one direction. It's because the game is trying to move you along a path.
Right.
Um and then if we were like, I would say, oh man, I think Grand Theft Auto 3 is probably the first game that made open world a thing, and I could be wrong about this, but I think that's the case. And I think the reason it worked in Grand Theft Auto is the reason that I think it's popular, and the reason that I don't play it too much, or those games, is because it's made to where it has linear missions, sure,
Yeah.
but you can go around and do crazy things and cause mass chaos and cause the game to work in a way where then you can't do a mission
It's
unless you
true.
quit or something. It's like you're almost changing the world for how it affects the player based on what you do. If you want to, crash your car into a bunch of things, get all the cops on you or helicopters, then that's changed everything. Or like in the Saints Row games, how there's different gangs, and then another way we're comparing games in open world is like the original Dark Souls is just as open world as Elden Ring, because in Dark Souls you have to travel to the next bonfire, to the next bonfire. There's no teleporting, but you're traveling and you can go back and forth. And I would even say a Metroid game is almost like a 2D open world game, because in Metroid you can't. It's like you want to get somewhere, but you have to go here, get something, so then you can go back, and then the world's open up for you. So I almost feel like this goes back to that RPG analogy, where the open world aspect is more of an attribute of the game rather than defining the game. Because I think we've seen Ubisoft get into this trap where they think, okay, let's have a big open world, missions you have to drive to, collectibles everywhere, and then that it's like that's its own thing instead of it having its own identity.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's where it's, you get caught up in the I need to create a massive open world to interact with, but then you kind of lose focus on the things that make the game unique, the gameplay and the interactions that you have. Um
And sometimes it works really well. Like I would say Halo 5 or Halo 6, it would have been, or what was it? Yeah. Infinite, Halo Infinite
oh yeah.
decided to have an open world. And I would almost say, Halo is still a first person shooter. They just decided to have an open world mission structure. The new Sonic Frontiers game coming out that everyone sounds like, oh, look, an open world Sonic. The developers have come and said it's actually open zone. Now, I think they're saying zone because they call the Sonic level zones.
Yeah.
But I guess the idea from that, it's still the same thing. It's an open world that you then play a zone within the world, and then you go to the next. And I think, yeah, we're getting to a point where the open world, if it's implemented, it has to be deliberate.
Yes.
But some developers, and I think Ubisoft is one, they just make it open world just to make it open world. And I think that same thing happened with the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, except because in order to make something Star Warsy, there has to be multiple planets. So what they do to make it not seem as open world is you have to go back to your ship to get to another planet. But once you do, you can go wherever you want as long as you unlock it. And
Yeah.
so
And that's
that
similar to like
reminds me.
Mass Effect.
Oh, is it? Yeah, that I didn't play Mass Effect,
Oh yeah.
but okay, because dialogue. Yeah, I'm that guy. But with Sniper Elite 5, it's funny because I would say then that is a true open world game, even though so The base game has 9 levels. A 10th level is DLC, and I actually beat it all.
Ooh.
Amazing game. Um, what's interesting is within a level, it's completely open world. In fact, as you play through the level, you can unlock new areas to start in because it doesn't matter where you start. You can do objectives however you want. In fact, there's certain objectives that have multiple ways of doing them, and depending on how you do them, it will affect the other objectives. Like blowing something
That's
up
pretty
that can't,
cool.
or yeah, blowing something up so that it shuts down like the power for another area. But the other option, instead of blowing it up, was to turn off power just for the thing you needed. So like that game, it's almost like they've refined the gameplay where then they can inject the open world element.
Yep. Yeah, you mentioned also the invasion aspect of Sniper Elite that
Oh yeah.
that causes other players to interact with your world, which can
That can change it because they can. I mean, especially if they're and I haven't seen this happen, but like alerting guards. Like, what if this invading player can like make it to where everyone's on alert and everything, and that yeah changes the map.
yeah.
So
Robert, I see mentioned Star Citizen, which I haven't played Star Citizen myself. But the most highly funded video game of all time, I would say,
yeah.
is technically an open world, right? I mean, there's lots of interaction that you can do with the existing world. Um,
Hey, is World of Warcraft open world?
See, and that's a good question. I think the things that kind of limit World of Warcraft is the same thing that limits Breath of the Wild, because once you go and slay that Bokoblin base, they're just going to regenerate at the next blood moon. Same goes for, if you slay a bunch of werewolves in World of Warcraft, they're just going to respawn later for other players to go kill.
Mm,
So are you really
yeah.
making a lasting impact on the world, or is it just that you have a big map that you can go do something and then you can probably go do it again?
Well, what is there a game that you would then consider to be um like definitely open world? Like I know you said you like The Witcher, but what's like a game that is like if the genre was open world, it would be said game. And
Good question.
that's why I'm thinking open world is not a genre, even though it's used that way.
I agree with that. I think that open world is probably not a genre in the same way that, like you said, RPG is not a genre, or immersive sim is not a genre.
Yeah.
Because what defines an immersive sim? Is it just that you're in a first person perspective? Because there's a lot of games that you play in first person mode and you play as a character. Does that make Halo an immersive sim?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. The first person shooter thing. Cause if you think it's something's in first person, that's role playing.
yeah, that's role playing
So,
too.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, when we throw these kinds of terms around to describe video games, I think that we really need to define our terms and talk about what elements really make that what it is. And there are lots of games, I think, and some that you've mentioned specifically, such as GTA and Metroid, where yes, it's an open map that you can choose where to go, but it is a linear structure in the sense that certain paths are locked off to you until you're ready to go to them. And even the original NES Legend of Zelda is that way. There are certain
Yeah.
dungeons that you can't get to unless you have certain items. And so the map is kind of constrained in a way that allows the player to grow with the game as they
Yeah.
as they discover new abilities, as they discover new items and things like that, they kind of unlock more portions of the map.
And Ian is saying, so would Horizon Forbidden West be considered an open world game? And he brings up a good point because there's a lot of these third person action games that are open world
Mhm.
where, and I could be wrong about this. I've played Horizon.
Same.
There's nothing particularly interesting about the combat system. It's a very, very good. What am I trying to say? It's like a
Yeah.
fine
It's
combat
it's a
system.
serviceable game.
Service, yeah. And so I think then what makes it more interesting is the fact that it's in this open world where you're traveling, exploring, and then coming across amazing sights. And I feel like it's almost like when they designed the game, it was the open world first. It's like, okay, let's design a game in an open world setting.
Right.
And that's maybe where Horizon came from. There was a time, and I forget how long ago, this could have been 10 years ago, 5 years ago, where more developers were wanting to make open world games. And I would even say now, those open world elements are in a lot of games. Like I was just playing Evil Dead, the game. And just like Sniper Elite 5, every level is a giant open world that you can approach it. I mean, there's specific objectives, but you can approach it differently. You could go to, loot first if you want to. And this doesn't really count. It makes me think, hey, is Super Mario Brothers 3 open world? But with like the new TMNT game, it has an overworld map
Yeah.
that you can travel through. So
And there's a lot of people don't use the term overworld anymore. Have you noticed that? Like,
yeah.
and I think that probably defines the new Sonic game more than open world. Is more like overworld. Is like
or hub world.
Hub world.
Sometimes I think hub is used. I remember a game that like showed this off. It was the Wolfenstein game. I forget how long ago. It was pretty old. I think it was the one on the original Xbox, but that had a hub system, and that was kind of revolutionary at the time, where people were like, wow, in the Wolfenstein game, you're in this one area and you go to a level and then you go to the level and then come back. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. And yeah, another game that did that really well was Gex, Enter the Gecko. Are you?
Oh, I didn't play that.
Yeah.
So that
you play as you play as a TV talking lizard, and you travel to you have your hub world, and you kind of warp to different zones to beat those levels.
Well, you know what? This was an interesting conversation because the open world aspect is very enticing, and it's enjoyable when it's done correctly, and it's almost a chore when it's done incorrectly. One, I think that can make the difference between not that a game is open world, but the game has implemented open world design.
Right.
Like if I would almost say Assassin's Creed games kind of lost that way, in a way where it was just more about, well, here's a map to collect things. So it's like a Banjo-Kazooie or Mario 64 in that way.
Yeah.
But then it made me think more about Elden Ring, even though it's linear in a way. The thing about Elden Ring is there's so many optional things that can truly make your experience completely different than someone else's, that I almost feel like Elden Ring has implemented open world probably best. Oh, and I meant to speak on something because Ian brought up Horizon.
Yes.
I first played Horizon after Breath of the Wild. So
Same here.
when I was traveling the world and wanted to climb up a mountain, you couldn't. There was invisible walls everywhere. And I think Zelda Breath of the Wild changed that aspect of open world games for people like, well, if I have an open world game, I want to be able to go anywhere easily. So Halo had the grappling hook. And I don't know how much you've played of Halo Infinite, but you could grapple anywhere to the top of a mountain in it. And so I think, oh yeah, and I meant to say, but Elden Ring didn't allow for that. But if you explored enough, you would come across a cave you would not expect to be somewhere, and there would be a whole boss battle inside there. So I think, it makes me think elements that make a game open world are the exploration, that you are getting satisfaction over discovery. Like, wow, I found this. You're being surprised about what the world gives you. I think that's one aspect.
Yeah.
And I think the other one is traversal, even though like Elden Ring doesn't allow you to go everywhere. I like if there's high mountains, for instance, you don't have a tool to go up that, but it allows you to go everywhere else other than that. So I think traversal and discovery, sense of discovery, are the elements that make something open world.
Yeah, those are two big elements, and I think that Breath of the Wild kind of hits on that with the different styles of traversal, right? You have like you have your parachute, you have your shield surfing, you have the horse, you have different methods of getting around the map. Ultronus mentioned Xenoblade Chronicles, which he thinks fits the Witcher 3 tier, where your decisions in side quests have effects on things down the line. I have not played a Xenoblade game
I
myself.
haven't yet, but I heard tomorrow they're announcing the new one and it comes out July 29th.
So
I don't
maybe
know if,
maybe that'll be
yeah.
something I have to invest in. Scorp says, how's it going? Um, some open world games are too open world. Looking at you, Breath of the Wild. Yes, we did cover Breath of the Wild and comparisons to Elden Ring. Like I said, Breath of the Wild seems like a large map with lots of physics interactions, but it doesn't seem like an open world to me for the reasons that we talked about before.
Yeah, I want to bring up that G1 Scorponok, right? Yeah, that said that. That's interesting because in Breath of the Wild, there are stretches where there's nothing.
Yeah, just
And the thing is, they have 100 of those seeds defined that it's like there's a chance anywhere that you might be able to find one, but really it's so spread out. Even though it's amazing sometimes the sense of discovery, like when I found like the whale or the fish whale skeleton or whatever, and I was in there, I was like, wow, this is amazing.
yeah. There's a lot of monument structures that you can find, but there's really not a lot of ways to interact with them. Like you said, it's like you find the windfish skeleton, but
Yeah.
it's not like you can do anything with it. It's just something to find.
Yeah. I mean, you can take a picture of it. I think there's a quest, but that doesn't really do anything to the greater game. That's almost like just a collect-a-thon. But Elden Ring, which looks, if I'm not mistaken, that map has to be as big or bigger than Breath of the Wild.
I'm sure.
But there is something. Oh, and Ghost of Tsushima is another good example of this. I can't believe I forgot that.
Oh yeah.
Ghost of Tsushima, everywhere you walk is something. Like you could just go in a straight line and you're gonna run into something. And it's weird because when you look at the map, it seems like a huge map, but then once you're traveling, it doesn't overburden you. It's because there's always something, and it's always something that does something, like something to upgrade your equipment, something to get more health, something for a side quest. Um, yeah, I think Ghost of Tsushima is a good one. I haven't beat it though, but I'm at the end.
I haven't played that. I might check that out. I also
Yeah.
saw that there's some new DLC coming for Resident Evil 8, so I might get distracted by that.
Oh yeah, that's right. And it's funny. I haven't even finished Resident Evil 8. Well, I just played the demo.
Oh.
I've been meaning to finish it because I played every other one, and then yeah, I saw that announcement. Now that's interesting because I could be wrong. Does Resident Evil 8 have a hub world as well?
Um Technically, yeah, I would say technically, because you've
Okay.
got the core village, and then you
Yeah.
have, the what you would call
Paths
dungeons that you go to
Oh, okay.
um
And so that makes me wonder, could the next Resident Evil be an open world game fully, completely? I mean, because it's like that could work if you think about it.
that would be
Is the first one
awesome.
open world? You're in a mansion.
Yeah.
And you have the whole mansion to yourself. Yeah, it's like I feel like a lot of games you could just really say they are open world in the sense of how you can travel or the setting. But
And I'm a big fan of like that Resident Evil game structure from like Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, where you're right, it's not exactly an open world. It's like an enclosed map. You're trapped inside of a building and you have to find a way out, but the way out is not clearly defined, and you end up crisscrossing paths that you've traveled before, and sometimes those
Yeah.
paths are different. Sometimes if you forget to close a window or something, there's going to be a hallway filled with zombies, things like that.
Yep.
I think that one of the things that kind of aggravates me, one of the things that kind of turns me off about a lot of games that implement an open world is that the implementation of it is done in a way that there are things to interact with, and there are quests to go on, there's side quests, there's other NPCs to interact with, but it's almost a little too obvious what is a side quest and what is something central to the campaign. And I think that that's where Witcher 3 shines, is because some of those side quests, because they're fully voice acted, because there's cutscenes that go along with them. I ended up finding a old bride that was killed, and her ghost was haunting a town, and because of all the cutscenes and things, I was
I
like,
remember that.
well, this is part of the main quest, right? And I didn't
Yeah.
realize that I had gotten sucked down a rabbit hole. And
Yeah, that I remember that. And you bring up a good point because that's exactly what Ghost of Tsushima does beautifully. I still don't know sometimes what was a side quest in that, because as you play, there are these optional missions, but every one of these optional side quests in Ghost of Tsushima tie into the main story. Like, just because you're doing the side quest doesn't mean it's something unrelated. It's like it's tied to the overall picture. So yeah, I think you would really like Ghost of Tsushima.
yeah, I'm gonna have
Does a
to
good
look
job of
into
that.
that because that's,
Yeah.
like you said, there's a lot of games that, there's always some loot to get, there's always something, but sometimes because the developers don't go the extra mile, because there's not like a cutscene associated with it, or like all of your interactions are in text instead of instead of
Oh,
being voice
voice.
acted,
Yeah.
it's very obvious that this is not something that's important. And that's the way I feel playing a lot of games that are technically open world, is you get to a place that is not necessarily important to the main story.
Yeah. And yeah, Mad Matt's here, and he was bringing up again, is someone had brought up Xenoblade Chronicles X, and I
Yeah.
haven't really played those games because I'm not big into RPGs, but I hear a lot about that game and that it has
And
mechs in
mechs,
it.
which
Yeah, so it's like I
that
need to
brings
play
up
that.
a question that I wanted to ask about, because you and I have talked a lot about, like, are are open worlds exclusive to RPG games? Is there a room for an open world game that is a different play style, that's a different archetype, if you will? How would you make an open world mech game, like a Mech Warrior or Battletech? Could you make an open world game that is like an open world Gundam game?
That's interesting because I think if that was eh, with these games, there has to be some linearity in how you're being guided in the world. I think because if you're just given like an open world mech game, the context has to be around being in a mech. Like Grand Theft Auto works because you're just a person, right? You're just a person. You have a backstory, but you're a person in a world. If there's an open world mech game, what is a mech doing in whatever is the open world? I keep thinking back to how Dark Souls they weren't made to be open world games, but they have amazing open world elements in them. And I've always talked about how a Gundam game would be perfect with the Dark Souls flavor to it, due to the deliberate actions of the mech, the mobile suit, limited resources. Um, and the idea would be you're in the Earth sphere and you're just traveling wherever you can while the war is going on. And other than that, like I'm trying to think of any other open world mech games that exist, but it's like those are mission based because you're in your mech to do something. Now, actually, I just remembered something. Sorry, I keep
No,
talking.
no, that's
Lost Planet 3. I don't know if you've played the third one.
I have. I love
Okay.
the Lost Planet series.
Yeah, me too. That's cool that you like that. The third one, it almost now I didn't complete it, but it almost seemed like it was open world. It's just that it had a linear structure to it,
Right.
because you're with these group of people in the planet, but underneath the surface, and you're having to go back and forth to, I guess, to get the facility safe again. I forget what was going on, but you had your mech. You're constantly upgrading, and then you're going out to do stuff and coming back, and that almost. I mean, I guess that has open world elements in a way. Yeah. What do you think?
No, I agree with that.
Lost Planet 3. Yeah.
Um, and like, it's interesting because the first Lost Planet definitely had more of an open world feel to it, because you could kind of travel around. And then they kind
Yeah.
of stripped that out for Lost Planet 2. I don't know if you noticed that like in Lost Planet
Yeah.
2, it was very mission based. It was like
It was mission. Yeah, because it was the whole thing of co-op, like
that was the
four people drop into a mission. Although I loved it.
it was
I
fun,
I
but
loved Lost Planet 2. And I don't know if you ever got to the part. It's like near the end of the game. If you have other people with you, you can transform and combine the mechs.
that is so
That
awesome.
I only did it once, but it was awesome. So it was interesting the direction they went with the third. But yeah, you're right. The first one was more open world in a way because you were actually traveling on this planet, and as you would go, like yeah, you would just it was just part of that world. You would come across things, and yeah, the second one definitely mission based. Each level had its own sort of setup or structure.
Yeah, and
You know?
Lost Planet 3 kind of was a return to that the spirit of Lost Planet 1, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that we've kind of talked about how, an open world is not really a genre of video game. It really is an implementation structure, something that that you
Yeah.
add to a game, not that defines a game, and that the you know a big map does not a open world make, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess when a developer's sitting there deciding on their game and they say, hey, we want to make an open world game, the idea is, well, what are some mechanics that would lend itself to an open world environment that haven't been done before?
Hmm.
Or on the flip side, you find out we want to make an open world game. What's a good IP that would translate well into that? An idea that I would love to do would be a Blade open world game where you're in Detroit and you have your place where you and Whistler where you do your upgrades, you upgrade your car, and then you can drive your car out. And at night is when you would go and hunt vampires. You can jump the rooftops, and it has like a awesome,
That's the best idea
third
that I've
person
heard
combat system.
in like
Yeah,
15 years. That is,
I know. I've been thinking about that for so long because the idea is, um, you would hunt vampires at night. During the day, you could do missions, but you can't get people alerted to who's this Blade dude, and then the police come after you, and then you
right.
have to go into hiding. That lends itself to that.
There's an awesome dichotomy that you can work with there. That's like very it would be like a Grand Theft Auto game where
Yeah.
yeah, you have police alertness and you have vampire alertness, and you have to execute both and kind of straddle that line. That is a Marvel.
Well,
If you're listening, that's the game we want. We don't want another
I
Spider-Man. We
know.
want we want
No,
Blade.
Blade. Oh man, think of Blade, all of his gear, and then maybe you can choose what you want to upgrade. Like out of all the different weapons you could possibly have, upgrade the car, and and then that made me think. Dang it, did I lose my thought? I had a really good thought that came. Oh yeah, speaking of superheroes, a lot of times developers say there's no way you can make a Superman game. And
I've heard that.
I think there is, and this is when you would do open world because you would have to do it where if you're Superman and you have to complete a mission, you want to do it like Superman would. You don't want to just shoot your lasers all through the city and destroy buildings, and it could have like maybe a victim count.
Ooh.
And then like over time in the game, people like you less, or maybe more villains will then show up or less like maybe there's like this balance meter as you play the game as Superman where you can end the game and become evil. Like that's what the challenge is. You can become evil Superman if you're not careful.
I mean, you know what? I feel like that game has been done in Infamous. The
Oh, that's interesting. I've played Infamous, and I guess you choose your path in that, right?
you
Because I think
do.
I must
There's
have chose a good
there's
guy.
like a morality meter. Yeah,
Uh,
I'm such a goody two shoes. Like Mass Effect, I was 100% Paragon. Infamous, I was such a good guy. Even like the old Knights of the Old Republic games, I was like super good guy Jedi. But yeah, I mean, Infamous has that same element of it where, and that's I'm glad that you mentioned superheroes because I feel like that's another definition of an open world game where throughout the course of the game, your actions, the way that you treat the civilians, the way that you beat up certain villains, it changes people's perception of you. It has mechanical effects on the powers that you have the ability to access, what your character looks like, what their powers look like. Um, and it really does shape what the environment looks like once you've hit certain milestones. So like if you're the kind of guy that's becoming a supervillain, you're going to notice that more crime and more opportunities for people to victimize civilians happens throughout sections of the city that you've already visited. And it's interesting how you can turn a good neighborhood into a bad neighborhood just by being a supervillain.
Yeah, you know what? And yeah, that brings up more. If we're talking about superheroes here, because so when you, one of the greatest examples of a game, a video for me anyway, video games that really like work me up in terms of I had a physical response to it. Some people do with stories, and that's easy to do with
Yeah.
stories. But for me, it's in Dark Souls when I beat a boss.
Yeah.
If I had trouble on a boss, then I feel like I
There's a
feel
visceral
physical, like,
reaction.
oh my god. And I think if a Superman game, someone did bring up, I think it was a tournament, that there was a Superman Returns open world game, and I think I remembered playing it, and I was just like, eh. But I think what needs to happen with this is let's make it where the Superman game is hard because it's easy
To be
to kill
Superman.
innocent people.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's right. It's easy to be Superman, so you could easily kill people that you don't mean to. And I think it's like, what if you're playing and you're trying to beat this mission as Superman and then you accidentally kill people? What if a game was able to make you go, oh man, I killed those innocent people? Like that would be the ultimate Superman game because him himself cares so much about humanity that he wouldn't want that to happen. So yeah, think if you have this boss battle and you're doing so good and you're getting there, and then at the end one of your lasers accidentally aims off course and you hit a gas station that blows up, and then it says like 6 fatalities, and you're like, oh crap. And then it, because let's say that affects the game, let's say the military stops coming in with their jets to help you
Yeah.
or something like that. I don't know, something where it affects the gameplay, or physically, it affects you physically. uh, yeah, because that's a gameplay element that has to do with, it has to do with like morality, yeah, decision making. I don't know.
Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
too easy to just say, if a civilian dies on your watch as Superman, it's game over. I
Yeah.
think what makes it an open world game, like you said, is the fact that the game doesn't end just because you've done something wrong, but the conditions of the game change in some
Yeah.
perceivable way.
Yeah. And it could be that the city or whatever is like, oh, we don't trust Superman. Maybe you get less XP because of that. And then, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's something
it's
there.
for greater minds than us.
I don't know. I think our minds are greater than most developers. No, the developers are great out there, but we would come up with some kick-ass games.
Oh yeah, no, I'm still reeling about that Blade idea because that is
Oh yeah, we can still talk more about it and try to like come up with something that we present to. I was always thinking because Microsoft wants to get a taste of the Marvel money,
yeah,
and they don't have. They had Crackdown, and they completely ruined that.
yeah.
So they can come back with a Blade open world game. I would play the crap out of
Or
that.
you and I just create our own vampire hunter named Saber and
Oh, yeah,
something like that.
yeah, yeah. That'd be cool.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that we've touched on a lot of good material here, and I think that
Yeah.
we've kind of dissected the appeal of open world games and kind of demythified it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think if people are into open world games, try to think of what it is about the game that you like, because it might not be that it's open world, but it's the tools you're given in that open world,
Yeah.
that could be applied to games that are more linear to make them feel more open.
And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned linearity because a game can have a large open map and still be linear and still be enjoyable. I would never a lot of people use linear as like a derogatory, but
Right.
I think that it's just a trait.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Especially you can look at it as set conditions that are challenging the player. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, closing thoughts. Give me your, I guess, now that we've hammered out our individual definitions of open world and what makes an appealing one, what is your I guess definition of an open world now, and what is your number one open world game?
Hmm. That's very tough. You know, uh, I would say I would almost say Elden Ring would be my number one open world, only because there's something to discover at every corner, and even I'm on a new game plus, and I'm playing it completely different than the first time because the second time around you have more tools to work with in the world. Um, but yeah, what makes a game open world? I think it's it's the tools you're given to explore that world. It really is, because I think with Assassin's Creed games, like I think it just happened to be open world, but it was really about something more. And then it just got stuck open world game, collectibles, collectible, and it just lost sight of what it was. So I think it's just unique gameplay. I'd even say, and maybe because it's recent, like the Sniper Elite 5, even though it's mission based, each level is open world and you have so many tools to use. And I've beaten the game, but I've replayed every level multiple times because
That's a
there's
good quality to have, is replayability.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So what about you?
Well, yeah, I would say that the interactivity with the world is probably the most defining trait for me. A
Mm,
large map is not necessarily necessary.
yeah.
It's not as important as the ability to leave a lasting impact on the world. Now, I
Yeah.
probably couldn't tell you what my favorite example of that is and what my favorite open world title is, but I guess I would give an honorable mention to, and this is going to be kind of out of left field, is Metal Gear Solid 5, which
Mm,
took that sort of,
yeah.
again, everyone, it feels like everyone 10 years ago was just like, we need to make an open world game.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no
Yep.
reason to make an open world Metal Gear game. And even Metal Gear 5 isn't necessarily open world because it is very mission based, but you have a large map to explore. And what I would say is that, similar to Far Cry or Breath of the Wild, you have a
Mm,
lot of physics interactions that you can do, and you have a large arsenal of tools that you can use. And one of the things that's most interesting about it is that the NPCs begin to adapt to the tools that you use. So if you're the kind of guy
mm,
that goes to outposts and snipes everyone in the outpost before infiltrating,
yeah.
the soldiers are going to start wearing helmets, and you're not going to be able to snipe
Ah,
them. If you,
that's
yeah, I
neat.
mean, if you're the kind of guy that likes to use smoke grenades to obscure your movements, then they're going to start wearing thermal goggles so that they can see you through the smoke. There's like those types of NPC interactions that, like I said, it's probably not my favorite, but I'm going to give it the honorable mention.
Is it is it worth playing today? I played Ground Zeroes, or what am I thinking of? I'm playing the one that was like the smaller mission before the main game came out,
Yeah, yeah, and ground,
and
it was
it was fun, but
It's a little short.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would say that you know, Kojima stories are as convoluted as as they come, but I think that the gameplay more than makes up for it. And I think that
Okay.
that's the defining trait to me of the Metal Gear Solid series, is that, the story is silly and campy, and I think that the games are good in spite of Hideo Kojima, not because of Hideo Kojima.
Oh, okay. Well, did you play Death Stranding?
I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't either. That looked too open world,
I
and
the Amazon delivery sim that everyone wanted.
yeah, I know.
Oh, well,
Cool.
I think that that is about it for us this week. Please, everybody, tune in tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. Central, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, to the Gundam Explained podcast over on Adam's channel.
Yeah.
Links to everything in the description below, and leave comments below if you're interested in those sort of paint along / build along contests, and what kind of community builds we can do, what resources I can provide, whether it's 3D print STLs or something like that. And we'll get something cracking, because I would like to engage a little bit more on that level.
Yeah, I love this idea. The fact that you got these miniature STLs and you're making a video on like painting it, like that's gonna get me started. And yeah, that sounds awesome.
Sweet. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Um, Adam, thank you as always for joining me, and thank
Oh
you
yeah,
for your
of
insight.
course.
You definitely have a larger library of video game knowledge to pull from than I do. I've got like my five
Oh,
core ones.
well. Well, I don't know. I mean, I've you've been able to keep up with me, and I always consider myself like a video game I don't know if fanatic's word. I just have a wealth of information for some reason. For some reason, I keep video game knowledge stored in here. So
Awesome, awesome. Well, I appreciate it for sure. And
Cool.
thank you everyone for keeping the chat lively. I appreciate you guys watching us, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your evening, great rest of your week.
Yep. See
Take it
y'all.
easy.